Imagine for a moment the sound of a roulette wheel. That sharp, mechanical clicking as the little white ball just dances over the numbers.
It's the sound of pure chance.
Exactly. It's the sound of a gamble. Now, underneath that clicking, I want you to start hearing a low hum. It starts out quiet.
Maybe it's a Gregorian chants, that echoing sound in a huge stone cathedral.
Yeah. And then you hear something else layering on top, the rhythmic, almost guttural sound of Sanskrit mantras.
And then the adhan, the Muslim call to prayer, ringing out from a minaret.
And then, Navajo songs, the drumming, it all starts to rise in volume.
It gets louder and louder.
Until all those beautiful, distinct melodies just blur. They run into each other and become this overwhelming, static white noise, just chaos.
And that right there is the soundscape we are stepping into today.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are tackling something that I think keeps a lot of people up at night. We're calling this one the signal and the static. And to kick it all off, I want to talk about the ultimate lottery.
The one you never even knew you bought a ticket for.
That's the one, the lottery of birth. I mean, just picture a world map for a second. Think about it. If you were born in, say, rural Alabama, what are the odds? You're probably a Baptist.
Almost certainly.
You believe in the Trinity, you believe Jesus died on the cross for your sins, and you believe the Bible is the inerrant word of God, and you hold these truths to be, well, self-evident.
Right. But then you spin that globe. Let's drop the pin in, say, New Delhi.
Suddenly, you're very likely Hindu. You believe in karma, in reincarnation, a whole pantheon of deities that all manifest the one ultimate reality, Brahman.
Spin it again. Riyadh.
You're Muslim. You believe in one God, Allah, and that Muhammad is his final messenger. Drop into Bangkok, you're Buddhist. Into Tel Aviv, you're likely Jewish.
And here's where the real headache starts. Because most of these people in all these different places are absolutely convinced with the same deep emotional intensity that their particular zip code just happened to be the one where the creator of the universe decided to drop the one and only truth.
It's the argument from inconsistent revelations, or as I like to think of it, the avoiding the wrong hell problem. Because, if there's only one capital T truth, why does geography seem to be the single biggest predictor of what you believe it is? It feels
arbitrary.
Completely arbitrary. It feels like a gamble. You were born here, so you believe this. You were born there, so you believe that.
And that is the tension we are really going to explore today. We've got a fascinating stack of sources that unpack this very problem. First, we're going to dive deep into the static, that sheer, overwhelming, contradictory variety of truths out there.
Right. The cacophony.
But then, and this is the pivot, we're going to look at an argument presented in our source material that makes a pretty bold claim. It claims there's a signal buried in all that noise.
A signal that's supposed to solve this problem of geography and history?
That's the claim.
Yeah.
That there's a way to get past the cultural programming. So we're going to journey from this feeling of absolute chaos of human belief to counterclaim of almost mathematical structural precision.
So we have to navigate what the sources call the shifting sands.
To see if we can find what they argue is a preserved anchor.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's start with the noise. Part 1, the cacophony, the static.
So if you dive into the sources, especially the ones analyzing this argument from inconsistent revelations, the very first thing that hits you is just how incompatible the foundational stories are, the stories we tell ourselves about where we all came from.
Oh, it's wild. It's not just, different flavors of the same thing. It's, if this is true, that literally cannot be true. Let's just start at the beginning. Cosmic origins.
The creation myths.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the ancient Greeks, you have this idea of creation bubbling up out of chaos. You have Erebus, which is darkness, and Nyx, night. It's this very elemental, almost violent process of the gods being birthed from these primordial forces.
Which is a universe away from, say, the Navajo cosmology.
Completely. The sources describe the Navajo tradition where the world is seen as a series of stacked plates. 14 of them, I think. And creation isn't a single event, a bang, or a word. It's a movement, an upward journey.
So life moves from the bottom up.
Exactly. It moves from these lower plates, which are inhabited by insect people and animal people, and it keeps ascending world by world until you get to the top plate, the glittering world, where first man and first woman finally emerge. It's a vertical climb into being.
And then you contrast that with the Babylonians.
Yeah.
The Enuma Elish.
Right, where you have the god Marduk, who goes into this epic battle with the primordial sea goddess Tiamat, this dragon of chaos. and he kills her and then splits her body in half like a clam.
To form the heavens and the earth.
Yeah. It's visceral. It's combat. Creation is the result of a divine war.
And then there's the Norse myth.
Which is just as visceral. The world is made from the corpse of a giant, Ymir. His flesh becomes the land, his blood becomes the oceans, his skull becomes the sky. It's a little grim.
A little. So the skeptic, the empiricist, looks at all this, right? And they make a prediction.
And the prediction is, this is what you'd expect. This is exactly what it would look like if humans just made it all up.
Explain that.
Well, you don't see one unified message from a single creator. You see reflections of local culture. Our sources quote the idea that these myths are mirrors where human passions sleep. The Greeks loved drama and philosophy, so their gods are dramatic and philosophical.
The Norse lived in this harsh, cold, brutal environment.
So their creation story is about a brutal physical act. The Babylonians lived between two powerful rivers, so their chaos monster is a sea goddess. It's all anthropomorphic, it's culturally bound.
The argument being we created God or the gods in our own image, not the other way around.
Exactly. And that's just the origin stories. I mean, that's the fun folklore stuff. When you get into the actual doctrines, the rules, the theology, it stops being just interesting variety and starts being logically impossible to reconcile.
And this is where we get to the clash of doctrines. This is the core of the wrong hell problem. Because these religions aren't just saying different things in different ways, they are making mutually exclusive truth claims.
The biggest one has to be the elephant in the room, the Jesus contradiction.
Walk us through that, because it's probably the most familiar clash for a Western audience.
Okay, so in mainstream Christianity, the absolute bedrock of the faith, the non-negotiable core, is that Jesus is God incarnate. He is the Son of God, part of the Trinity. And, crucially, he died on the cross for the sins of humanity.
Right. Take away the crucifixion and resurrection, and the whole thing collapses. The source says the cross is the core.
It is the entire point. But then you look at Islam,
which also reveres Jesus.
Very much so. He's considered one of the mightiest prophets of God.
Right.
But the Quran is absolutely explicit on 2 points. One, he is not God. He's not the son of God. He's a man, a prophet. And two, and this is the big one for Christians, the Quran states that he did not die on the cross.
He neither dies nor grieves, is how the source material puts it. That the crucifixion was an illusion of some kind.
Right. So you have a direct contradiction on the most important event in Christian history, and then you bring in Judaism.
From which Christianity emerged.
And Judaism says he was a historical figure, maybe a teacher, but he was not the Messiah. The prophecies weren't fulfilled. So just look at the logic here. He cannot be God incarnate who died on a cross, and a human prophet who did not die on a cross, and not the Messiah at all.
It's a logical impossibility. They can't all be true. If one of those statements is factual, the others must, by definition, be false.
100%. They cannot all be right. And that's just the Abrahamic faiths. We haven't even touched the Eastern traditions. The afterlife clash gets even crazier.
Right. So you have Hinduism, which proposes reincarnation. The central concept is the Atman, the individual eternal soul. And the goal is for that soul to go through cycles of rebirth until it achieves moksha, liberation, and realizes its oneness with Brahman, the ultimate reality.
Your soul merges back with the universal soul. But then you look at Buddhism, which came out of that same cultural milieu, and Buddhism's central doctrine is anatta.
Which means no self, or no soul.
Exactly. It's a direct rejection of the Hindu Atman. Buddhism teaches that the idea of an eternal, unchanging self is an illusion. The goal isn't to merge your soul with anything. The goal is nirvana, which literally means to extinguish or blow out. It's the cessation of the illusion of self.
So one major world religion says your fundamental goal is to realize the eternal nature of your soul, and another major world religion says your fundamental goal is to realize you don't even have a soul.
I mean, you can't get more contradictory than that. So imagine you live your whole life as a devout Hindu trying to purify your Atman, and then you die, and the universe says, sorry, there's no such thing as an Atman. You were supposed to be eliminating that idea.
That's the gamble. That's the wrong hell dilemma in its starkest form. It feels like a casino. You place all your chips on Jesus or Buddha or Shiva, and then you spin the wheel. And you just have to hope you didn't pick the wrong one because your parents happen to take you to a specific building on Sundays.
For the skeptic, for the empiricist, this creates a massive, massive credibility gap. If there's a loving God who wants to be known, why is the message so hopelessly garbled? Why is the signal so prone to interference? It just doesn't add up.
But it gets even more complicated. Because as our sources point out, the static isn't just between different religions, it's often inside them too.
Yes, the fracture within. This is where it gets really interesting because now you're not comparing apples and oranges. You're looking at the same apple and finding out it's got two different cores.
And the source material does a really deep dive on the Bible to illustrate this point. And it's not about nitpicking minor details. These are foundational texts and concepts.
Okay, so take Genesis, the very first book. You don't even have to read far. Just the first 2 chapters. You hit a major snag almost immediately.
The 2 creation accounts.
Exactly. Genesis chapter 1, you get this grand cosmic 7-day account. It's very orderly. Day 1, light. Day 2, sky. And so on. And, crucially, on day 5 and the morning of day 6, God creates the animals. Fish, birds, cattle, creepy crawlies. Then, as the grand finale, he creates humans, male and female, together. In his image, he created them. Boom. Done.
Very poetic, very structured. But then you turn the page to Genesis chapter 2.
And it feels like you've started a different book. Suddenly, the order is completely flipped on its head. In this version, God creates Adam first, from the dust. He's all alone in the garden.
And God says it's not good for man to be alone.
Right. So, to solve this problem, what does God do? He creates the animals, he brings them to Adam to see what he'll name them, hoping to find a suitable helper. None of them work out. So then finally, God puts Adam to sleep, takes one of his ribs, and makes Eve.
So just to be clear, in chapter 1, it's plants, then animals, then man and woman together.
Right.
In chapter 2, it's man, then plants, then animals, then woman.
It's a direct contradiction in the sequence of events. And skeptics point to this and say, look, this is the smoking gun for human authorship. This is what's called the documentary hypothesis. The idea that these were 2 different oral traditions from 2 different tribes, an Elohist source and a Yahwist source that got stitched together by a later editor, and they just didn't bother to smooth out the seams.
And it's not just narrative sequence. There are theological contradictions too, right?
Ah.
About the very nature of God.
Huge ones. The source material brings up a classic example, Genesis 32:30. This is the story where Jacob wrestles all night with a mysterious figure. At the end, Jacob says, I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved.
He saw God. It says it explicitly.
Explicitly, face to face. But then you fast forward to the New Testament, the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 18, and it says, clear as day, no man hath seen God at any time.
That is categorical? It's not ambiguous?
Not at all. It's a binary choice. Either Jacob is telling the truth and he saw God, or the author of John is correct and no one has ever seen God. They cannot both be literally true.
And what about the moral character of God? The ethical whiplash, as the sources call it.
Oh, this is the big one. The Old Testament, Book of Exodus, the Law of Moses. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It's retributive justice. Very clear, very straightforward.
If someone harms you, the punishment should match the crime.
Exactly. Then Jesus comes along in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew and says, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also.
Now, of course, theologians have spent centuries developing ways to harmonize these 2 ideas.
Yeah.
Progressive revelation, fulfilling the law rather than abolishing it, and so on.
Of course. But to an outsider, to the person just trying to make sense of the static, it looks like the CEO of the universe completely changed the company's mission statement. It looks like the character of God evolved from a warrior judge to a pacifist.
And then, perhaps the most difficult internal problem is the issue of failed prophecies.
This is tough stuff because this isn't about interpretation, it's about testable claims. The source points to several passages in the New Testament that seem to predict the end of the world, the second coming, would happen within the lifetime of Jesus' contemporaries.
Like in Luke 21.
Right. Jesus is talking about the end times, and he says, truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened. And in 1 John, the author says, it is the last hour.
And here we are, 2,000 years later.
Yeah.
That generation has most certainly passed away.
We're still here, spinning the wheel. So the skeptic, the empiricist, looks at all this evidence, the geographical lottery, the clashing cosmologies, the mutually exclusive doctrines, the internal contradictions, the failed prophecies, and they come to a very simple, very elegant conclusion. The porous mind theory. It's psychology. The source material mentions scholars like Luhrmann and Fetzer. And the basic idea is that religious experiences, feelings of awe, moments of transcendence, they are a deeply human phenomenon. They aren't unique to one faith.
So even atheists can have these anomalous sensory events.
Exactly. A scientist can look through a telescope at a nebula and feel an overwhelming sense of awe and connection to the universe. That feeling isn't proof of God, it's proof of how the human brain processes wonder.
So from this perspective, the static isn't a broken radio signal from God, it's just us.
It's just us. We are the static. Our cultures, our histories, our psychologies. We create the gods in our own image. We write the books, we edit the books, we fight over the books. And that theory, it neatly explains everything we've talked about. It explains the map. It explains the contradictions. It explains the evolution of morality.
It's an incredibly compelling argument. If you look at all the data we've laid out without any pre-existing theological lens, the human construction hypothesis fits the facts almost perfectly.
So, case closed, right? We can all just go home and, I don't know, stare into the existential void.
Well, not quite, because this is where our deep dive takes a very sharp turn. This is the pivot.
Okay.
We have spent all this time listening to the noise, mapping out the chaos, defining the static. But now I want to introduce a completely different perspective from our source material. A perspective that looks at the exact same data, the exact same chaos, the same contradictions, and doesn't see a mess. It sees a pattern.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So how does the rationalist answer the empiricist's very neat and tidy explanation?
By asking you to listen for a different sound, the static fades, and instead you hear the rhythmic sound of digging. Crunch, crunch, a shovel hitting dry, hard earth.
Okay, I'm digging. What am I digging for?
You're performing what the sources call the first digging. You're digging for something that was buried inside you all along. In the source text, this concept is called the Fitrah.
Fitrah. Okay, you have to define that for me. Is that like a soul or conscience?
It's more specific. The source defines it not as some kind of programmed memory. It's not like you're born knowing the Ten Commandments or something. It's described as a faculty to scan, an innate sovereign intelligence.
A faculty to scan, like a built-in truth detector.
Yep.
Or a BS detector.
In a way, yes. The argument presented is that every human being is born with an innate, intuitive ability to recognize fundamental truths, to recognize purpose over randomness, to recognize cause and effect, and to recognize a universal moral grammar. It's the hardware you're born with before any cultural software gets installed.
Okay, but that brings us right back to the original problem. If we all have this built-in Fitrah, why is the world such a mess of contradictory beliefs? Why aren't we all on the same page?
Because of what the sources call the stream analogy.
I love a good analogy. Lay it on me.
Okay, so imagine a pure, crystal clear spring high up on a mountain. That spring is the original divine revelation, the pure signal.
Okay.
Now, as that stream of pure water flows down the mountain, it travels through different lands. It passes through soil, through mud, through human villages. People come and dip their buckets in it. They wash their clothes in it. They build dams. They divert it. They sometimes dump their waste in it.
So the water gets murky. It gets corrupted.
Exactly. The source material argues that the diversity of religion, all the static and chaos we see, isn't because God is confused or sent 100 different messages. It's the result of two things: the human right to choose, our free will, and the inevitable interference of history. Human hands, human politics, human scribes. They all muddied the pure water.
So let me see if I've got this. The atheist argument is the water is muddy, therefore there's no pure spring. But this Quranic argument is the water is muddy, which proves we need a filter to get back to the original purity of the spring.
You've got it. That's the crucial shift in perspective. The atheist hypothesis correctly predicts that man-made religions will be a chaotic mess. But here's the twist. The Quranic hypothesis also predicts chaos. It predicts that all previous scriptures and revelations would have been corrupted over time.
Wait, really? It anticipates that other religions would be messy.
Yes. This is a fundamental point in the source material. The Quran doesn't come along and say, everything that came before is 100% false from start to finish. Instead, its position is essentially, those messages came from the same source, but the transmission line got hacked along the way.
Hacked. I like that. It's a modern way to put it. So let's talk about this theory of alteration.
This is where we get into part 4, shifting sands versus the anchor. The source cites a very specific, very powerful verse from the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 79. And it's a heavy accusation. It says, "So woe to those who write the scripture with their own hands and then say this is from Allah to exchange it for a trivial price."
Woe to those who write the scripture with their own hands. That is incredibly direct. It's not just saying people misinterpreted the text. It's claiming that people actively added to it and changed it. That the Bible, the Torah, maybe others, they started divine, but then humans started editing.
And this is where the argument gets really layered and interesting. The source then connects this Quranic accusation to a confession from inside the Bible itself.
A confession inside the Bible.
Yes, from the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 8, verse 8. In the Old Testament, Jeremiah is railing against religious scholars and scribes of his day, and he says, and this is a direct quote, "How can you say we are wise for we have the law of the Lord, when actually the lying pen of the scribes has handled it falsely?"
Whoa. Hang on, the lying pen of the scribes. So the Bible itself contains a passage that admits its own scribes were corrupting the text.
That's the argument the source is making. It's presenting Jeremiah 8.8 as Exhibit A. It's saying, look, even your own book admits that human hands interfered with the data. So when you see those contradictions we talked about earlier, Genesis 1 versus Genesis 2, or Jacob seeing God versus no one seeing God, the Quranic explanation isn't that God is confused. It's that those contradictions are the human edits.
The static.
They are the static. The signal, this argument goes, is the core message that remains consistent across them. The belief in one God, the core ethics of justice and mercy. The static is the Trinity, the idea of God wrestling a man, the changing rules, the parts that are illogical or contradictory.
So it becomes a kind of grand synthesis. It explains both the similarities between religions, the shared divine origin, the pure water from the spring, and the glaring differences, human corruption, the mud.
Exactly. And this framework also explains why the standard ways people try to solve this problem usually fail.
The standard filters.
Right. When people are confronted with this wrong hell problem, they typically retreat to one of three positions. Position one is exclusivism.
Which is, my religion is 100% right and everyone else is 100% wrong and probably going to hell.
Right. Which, as we've said, feels arrogant and seems to be based on the lottery of your birth.
Okay, what's position two?
Inclusivism. This is the idea that, well, my religion is the most true, but you guys in other religions, you have a piece of the truth. You're like, anonymous Christians or partial Muslims, you'll be saved through my religion, even if you don't know it.
That sounds incredibly patronizing. It's like patting another faith on the head and saying, oh, that's cute, you almost got it right.
It is patronizing.
Yeah.
And then you have position three, pluralism. This is the John Hick approach. It's the we're all climbing the same mountain, just on different paths idea.
Which sounds lovely. It's the bumper sticker solution.
It sounds lovely, but the source argues it's intellectually bankrupt. Because, as we've demonstrated, the religions make mutually exclusive claims. If Christianity says Jesus is God and Islam says Jesus is not God, they are not climbing the same mountain. They are climbing different mountains in opposite directions. Pluralism ends up having to reduce God to this vague, contentless, ultimate reality, a meaningless blob that stands for everything and therefore nothing.
So if exclusivism is arrogant, inclusivism is patronizing, and pluralism is logically incoherent, what is the fourth option? What is the Quranic solution?
The Quran doesn't claim to be another path up the mountain. It claims to be the map for the entire mountain range. It calls itself Al-Furqan.
Al-Furqan, what does that translate to?
The Criterion.
Yeah.
The standard by which all other claims are to be judged.
So not just another book, but a grading rubric, a collective lens.
A corrective lens is a perfect way to put it. It acknowledges the partial truth in other revelations. It affirms, yes, Moses was a true prophet, yes, Jesus was the Messiah. But it then claims to act as the tool to separate the original signal from the human static. It purports to be the instrument you use to find the pure water that's still present in the muddy stream.
Okay, so that is a huge claim, a monumental claim. I am the uncorrupted final file. Use me to scan your corrupted old files and fix them. But anyone can claim that. I could write a book on a napkin right now and call it the super-duper Criterion.
You absolutely could. And that is why the argument doesn't stop at the claim. This is where we have to move into part 5, the signal, the evidence for its structural precision.
All right, let's get into it. Why should anyone believe this one file is uncorrupted when all the others, according to the theory, are not? What's the evidence?
The source material points to several distinct lines of reasoning. The first is the clinical difference in the Quran's own claim of preservation. In Surah 15, verse 9, it says, "Indeed, it is we who sent down the Quran, and indeed, we will be its guardian."
So it contains a promise of its own protection.
Yes, but it's more than just a promise. Compare the history of its compilation. The Bible, the Vedas, these are, by their own admission, compilations. They were written by dozens of different authors, over thousands of years in different languages on different continents, and then edited and canonized by councils of men hundreds of years after the fact.
Right. The Council of Nicaea, the Masoretic scribes. There are a lot of human fingerprints all over the process.
A lot. The Quran's history is fundamentally different. It was revealed over a short 23-year period to one man. It was memorized word for word in its original Arabic by thousands of his companions as it was being revealed. It was written down immediately on whatever was available, scraps of leather, palm leaves, the shoulder blades of camels.
So from a purely historical data integrity standpoint, the argument is that it's a much cleaner, more direct, and more verifiable transmission line.
That's the argument, and that leads to the second point,
Yeah.
the argument from internal consistency.
This is the verse from Surah 4.82, right?
Exactly. It poses a direct challenge to the reader. It says, then do they not reflect upon the Quran? If it had been from any other than Allah, they would have found within it much contradiction.
It's basically daring you to find a plot hole. It's saying, look at all the static we found in other books. If this were written by a human, especially an unlettered man in the 7th century Arabian desert, it would be a mess. It would contradict itself. It would be full of the same static. Go ahead, look for it.
And remember the context for this challenge. The Prophet Muhammad was known to be unlettered. He couldn't read or write. He wasn't a scholar, a poet, or a theologian. And yet, the text attributed to him over 23 years, covering theology, law, history, and prophecy, is claimed to be structurally and thematically seamless.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate again. Consistency can be subjective, can't it? Couldn't someone argue it's just really good, consistent poetry? Maybe Shakespeare's plays are consistent too.
An excellent point. And that is precisely what the original critics in 7th century Mecca said. They dismissed it. It's just poetry. It's magic. It's just stories of the ancients that he's repeating.
So how does the rationalist, or how does the Quran itself answer that specific charge?
With its most famous and, some would say, most powerful argument, the inimitability challenge. In Arabic, it's called Ijaz al-Quran.
This is the falsification test.
Yes. And I love this part because it's almost scientific in its approach. The Quran doesn't just say, believe me. It says, you think I'm making this up? You think this is human speech? Fine, prove it.
Produce a chapter like it.
The challenge is laid down multiple times. The most famous is in Surah 2, verse 23. And if you are in doubt about what we have sent down upon our servant, then produce a surah the like thereof, and call upon your witnesses other than Allah, if you should be truthful.
And a surah, a chapter, can be incredibly short. Some are just 3 lines long.
Exactly. But the challenge isn't just write 3 nice-sounding lines. The challenge is to replicate its unique linguistic and literary quality, to match its cadence, its depth, its rhetorical power, its multi-layered meaning, all within the strict grammatical and stylistic form of the Arabic text.
And the people it was issued to, the Arabs of that time, they weren't slouches when it came to language. That was their entire culture. Poetry battles were their Super Bowl.
They were the undisputed masters of the Arabic language. And they had every single incentive to meet this challenge. Think about it. If they could have produced just one short chapter that the people agreed was of the same quality as the Quran, they could have destroyed Islam in its cradle. No wars, no persecution, no debate, just write a better poem.
And the outcome?
They couldn't. The source argues that for 1,400 years, despite the immense political, military, and financial incentive to disprove the text, that challenge stands unmet.
So let's summarize this part. The argument is, the static of human religion is demonstrably full of contradictions and historical errors. The signal, the Quran, claims to be different, and it offers evidence. A verifiably preserved history, a claim of internal consistency, and a standing falsifiable challenge of its inimitability that, it is argued, has never been met.
Precisely. And that leads us to the final part of this journey, the universal logic.
Because we started this whole thing with the fear of the lottery of birth, the terror that our beliefs are just an accident of our upbringing.
And the Quranic model completely flips that on its head. It argues that you're not supposed to just blindly follow the religion of your parents. In fact, the Quran constantly criticizes people who use that exact excuse, who say, we found our fathers doing this, so we will simply follow in their footsteps.
So it's actually anti-tradition.
It's anti-blind tradition. It demands a rational selection.
So that first digging we talked about, the Fitrah, that's the tool you're supposed to use. And the Quran presents itself as the data. You are supposed to use your own God-given intellect to verify the data.
Yes. It aims to move you from a state of gambler's dread, that passive fear of picking the wrong hell, to a state of empowered, active investigation. You are not asked to blindly believe to avoid punishment. You are asked to look at the evidence. Look at the sky, look at the earth, look at the historical record, look at the consistency of the message, and use your reason to recognize the signal.
It also claims to validate the original signal in those other traditions. It says, yes, the message of Moses was true, the message of Jesus was true, but look at the human edits that were introduced. It seeks to correct the narrative of Jesus from God who died on a cross, which it calls static, back to prophet who called people to worship the one God, which it claims is the original signal.
And in doing so, it claims to be the one message that stands outside of time and geography. It's presented not as a melting pot of all religions, but as the singular seed, the original pure seed from which the truth in all those other religions grew, before it was covered over by the weeds of human culture and history.
We've gone from the frantic spinning of the roulette wheel
To the solid weight of the anchor.
from the overwhelming white
And
noise.
to the single, clear tone.
Let's bring those soundscapes together one last time.
That faint, frantic clicking of the wheel, the static of 1,000 different chants and prayers. But now it starts to fade. The volume drops. And in the silence that follows, a single, steady, clear tone emerges. A perfect, unwavering sine wave.
This signal.
We started this deep dive with a really terrifying idea, didn't we? That truth is just a victim of geography. That what you believe about everything important, life, death, God, purpose, is basically decided by your zip code.
It's the lottery of birth. And it leads to this deep cynicism that if everyone claims to be right, then probably nobody is right. It's all just static.
But the journey we've taken through these sources presents a different possibility. What if the confusion, the static, isn't a bug in the divine system, but a predictable feature of human interference? And what if there's a tool designed specifically to bypass that static?
The argument we've unpacked today is that you don't have to be a victim of that lottery. It argues you were born with a shovel, your intellect, your Fitrah, and that there's a map, a signal, that claims to have been perfectly preserved precisely so that you, right now, could find it.
It challenges you to stop looking at the muddy water in the river and assuming there's no pure spring. It challenges you to put on your hiking boots and go look for the source yourself.
So here's the final provocation we want to leave you with.
The static is the result of human hands writing over a divine message, and the signal claims to be the one unedited original broadcast. Do you possess the tools to actually tell the difference?
Or are you just accepting the frequency your culture, your family, your society dialed in for you?
When you listen to the world, what do you hear? Are you listening for the signal? Or have you just gotten comfortable with the static?
Something to think about.
Indeed.
That's all for this deep dive. As always, dive deep and listen closely.